Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world today. Welcome to today's Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer. Today's session is a little bit different. We are going to be focusing on Scrum outside of software, and I have three really awesome PSTs with me today. I am your host, Lindsay Villasina. I didn't introduce myself, so now you know who I am, and I'll introduce Shirley, Santiago, Daria Bagina, and Mary Iqbal. So welcome, and let's get into some quick items here before we get started. So your microphones will be muted throughout the session, but we do want you to ask questions, and we ask you to start putting in your questions about Scrum outside of software or just Scrum in general into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. So please utilize that to ask all of your questions. If you have any technical questions, please utilize the chat. We're going to try to keep all of the questions for the session in the Q&A box, and then any technical types of questions or comments or that type of thing in the chat. So please remember to do that. And the recording for this will be available within 24 hours. It will be published as a podcast. So let's go to the next slide. Really quick about Scrum.org. We were founded by Ken Schwaber in 2009. We offer training and certification in professional Scrum. And we're focused on, we have very consistent training no matter where you are in the world. Our trainers are teaching to the same materials. We have a global community as well. And we also encourage you to continue your learning beyond the classroom or self-learning. And we have lots of resources on our website to help you do that. And with that, I hope that this session helps you on that learning journey. And I am going to kick it over to Daria to introduce herself.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. Really excited about this session. And my name is Daria Bagina, and I am obviously a professional Scrum trainer here at Scrum.org. And I am also focusing a lot on the Scrum Master journey because I am working as a Scrum Master, continue to work as a Scrum Master, and my focus is really on helping Scrum Masters become more successful and get to that moment where they start to see results in their teams, in their organizations faster. So I'm doing a lot of mentorship, providing different resources, guides and templates, and things like that. So yeah.
Awesome. So next, Mary, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Iqbal. I am the Agile Transformation Manager for WPS Health Insurance located in the state of Wisconsin. I am currently responsible for improving the adoption of Agile for over 60 Agile teams. And I'm thrilled to be here with you today. I have used Agile in a lot of different frameworks, everything from human resources to marketing to launching new government contracts. So I'm passionate about Agile, and I'm passionate about it can be used anywhere, and it can be used to help reduce risk and deliver value sooner, no matter what your business problem is. So I'm thrilled to be here with you today and looking forward to engaging with you in your questions and talking through your most pressing concerns. Shirley?
Hello, good evening. It's evening here in the Philippines. I'm Shirley Santiago, one of the PSTs as well at Scrum.org. I'm working with different organizations aside from IT. I'm working with organizations in fuel and oil, energy, bank, and insurance, also for food and beverage. I used to work in the IT industry for more than 2 decades, but right now I'm focused more on helping organizations in adopting the agility mindset. I'm also one of the core stewards at Scrum.org, so I'm very excited to join in this session and answer any questions you might have on how to apply Scrum for non-IT domain.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And I encourage you all to please, any questions that you have, please start entering them into the Q&A. And I'm going to kick this off with a question directed at Mary. So Mary, can you tell us a little bit about the ways that you've seen people use Scrum in human resources?
Absolutely. So I've seen industries or organizations utilize Scrum in human resources, and they split it up into multiple focus areas, at least in organizations that I've seen work with it. So recruiting may be a product that they're delivering, or supporting current employees may be a product that they're delivering. So work comes in to the Scrum teams. It's prioritized the same way that you would on a product backlog for a technical team. And the team does their sprint planning meeting and delivers the work within sprints, just exactly the way you would expect to see other teams deliver their work. The main difference I would see is that in human resources, there are definitely, you're expecting to see, particularly for supporting existing employees, some emergencies come through. And so they do leave a bit of capacity free for the team to deal with those kind of questions that come through. So still have sort of a service level agreement, if you will, where they need to take care of those more pressing questions. And that's to be expected. So they deal with that by leaving some capacity out, but also understanding that if something more pressing comes through, they may have to be flexible on what they're working on in any given day. But yeah, absolutely. In fact, human resources is one of our higher performing teams because they really adopted the change in mindset that is necessary for a successful Scrum team. So when I said to them, hey, this is a change in mindset, they really took that seriously and are open to making sure that they're thinking about their work differently and approaching their work differently. So I'm very pleased with their performance and the way they've been able to deliver value to the organization in a much more flexible way using Scrum.
Awesome, thank you. This next question, I think you all could probably chime in a little bit on. So we'll start with Daria and then we'll work our way to Shirley and Mary as well. So are there any modifications or considerations for applying Scrum in a non-software environment? How is it the same and how is it different, if it is different?
Yeah, very good question. So I worked with teams that are kind of coming from still a little bit technical, but have their own constraints in terms of the workflow, because there are certain domains or certain specialties that are included, such as artists, for example, on a development team and kind of including artists in that, or non-technical at all. So working with a team where you would have people from marketing, L&D, and logistics, people who are not at all on the technical side. And it is a little bit different. And I think that there are some considerations to kind of take into account when you are applying that. So with an example of, say, the artists, right, that I talked about at the beginning, is the way they work is very different. Their workflow might be a little bit extended, right? If you are working with them, it is important to take that into account, kind of how you would implement the work that they do. It might need to be adapted in potentially how you implement it, right? So because the workflow, say creating art assets, can be a little bit longer, you might need to think about how can we still create working products, right? Working increments, but have that art part implemented, but maybe not fully completed, right? So how can it be a prototype? Can it be more of maybe concept art that we can somehow implement into our work? So that is something that definitely needs to be taken into account, because otherwise it is, especially if you have shorter sprints, I'd say, and you want to keep them shorter because you want to have that short feedback loop, is to think about how you can maybe modify that workflow and make it much more aligned with the rest of the team, still have produced some value, kind of identifying what are the value points for those items, right? Is it always, say, a complete art asset, or are there other items in between, such as concept art, that are already something of value that we can present and we can get feedback on? So I think that those are kind of what you would want to take into account. And when with the examples of learning and development or logistics, this is also very, very specific. Think about logistics. Say we want to create a product and we want that product to be delivered, go through a cycle of logistics. So that's kind of the actual value you want to deliver. But realistically, if you are in a big company, that process takes time, right? You won't be able to get an actual product or say a gift to verify or to review to someone fast enough due to just kind of logistical constraints. So what can you do instead, right? What could be those steps that still produce value that can get you kind of move forward towards it? Maybe it is a step where you have a set of different items that you would like to choose from, right? Maybe it's not the actual physical items that you're going to look at, but it can be something else. It can be looking at images, or it can be looking at the descriptions of potential items. So that can be something that you might need to kind of take into account to adapt your process, kind of taking in some of the steps along the way.
Awesome, thank you. Shirley, do you have anything to add there based off of the companies that you've worked with?
I like that Daria mentioned about value. It's the same as with the companies I'm working with. Usually when they want to use Scrum as their ways of working, or in developing being an agile organization, I ask them to focus on their goals and outcomes. What is your goal? What is the outcome? What is your desired outcome? And what I notice with organizations is once you center them around outcomes and goals, they think now of not just about the tasks that they have to do in their teams or in their organization, but how can we create an alignment within the organization such that we move closer to that goal or to that vision or purpose of our company? So that's how I usually center them. No? And I remind them that Scrum is a tool for you to communicate and create that alignment and transparency within the organization, but figure out what is your outcome and what is your product. So once it's clear to them what they are trying to achieve, they can now use Scrum for them to frequently inspect and adapt and move them closer to a goal or the vision that they have. So let me be much more specific. In power generation, for example, one of the teams that I worked with was centered around how can we help in reducing the cost in producing electricity. And they used Scrum, so multiple sprints, for them to experiment on flush flooding that helps in producing energy with reduced cost. So that's one. No, you can. So I saw that in their own experience that they can leverage Scrum for them to learn and experiment. Another example is in banks. In banks, there are programs, for example, a loan program wherein they experimented whether they'll be able to reach the target customers like teachers and riders. And they did this, they did it in multiple sprints, and they learned about how the loan programs can be adopted. And they call this program as Loan Ranger. So they LOAN Ranger, and they send people and they try to be able to meet an outcome of being able to reach their target market or target audience faster and making it accessible to their target market. In my own company, this is I have a small food and beverage company inspired by a large soft drinks organization. And here we experiment on releasing new food items based on the preferences of our target consumer. So we do 1 week sprint, and we have very specific accountabilities, and we are clear with the goals that we want. And we use metrics as a food and beverage company so that we can adapt quickly if something is not working. So for example, removing some of the food items that are not really selling. And with frequent inspection and adaptation, we have evolved our product offerings and how we work together also as a Scrum team. So those are a few examples based on my own experience. And Scrum being a framework, it can be used as a tool for us to be able to achieve outcomes, and as long as we're centered around goals. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Shirley. So this next question kind of piggybacks off of something that you had just mentioned. We'll start with Mary for this one. How do non-IT companies, the example they gave here was core engineering, but it could be any non-IT industry, perceive all of these agile frameworks? Do they think they may not work outside of IT? And maybe to add on to this, how do you introduce Scrum to these organizations?
So that's a great question. Lizzie, I think we should share the slide that we have on this topic, and then I'll address the question a little bit more directly after that.
Yes, I had unfortunately, I forgot to share that before.
Okay.
So we will share it now.
So what the slides represent that Lindsay's bringing up now is a visualization of the 14th and 15th annual State of Agile report, which is released by Digital AI annually, and it compares the Scrum adoption in various industries. So you can see software development is, of course, the most popular. And when I say industries, I mean, how are you using Scrum in your organization? So software development is very popular. IT, which to me can mean a lot of different things, but it could mean help desk, it could mean infrastructure. Then we have operations growing from 12% to 29%, marketing growing from 7% to 17%, human resources, and sales and operations. So using Agile outside of software development is not new, and in fact is growing at a extremely quick, fast, rapid rate. But to answer your question specifically, how do they go about adopting Scrum? I think they go about it very similar to the way information technology teams would go about it. So first you ask the question, is Agile the right fit for us, right? Agile is actually not a great fit everywhere. It needs to be used in a complex environment where more is unknown than known. So think about, is it the right fit for this particular environment? And the shortcut I use in my mind is, if you can write a set of work instructions on how to deliver that thing that you're trying to deliver, maybe Agile's not a great fit. If you know exactly how to deliver it and you know what's being asked for, maybe Agile's not a great fit. So ask yourself that question, is it a good fit? After that, if it is a good fit, then the first thing I would do is define the product, right? Going back to what Shirley and Daria were talking about, what value am I trying to deliver here? So define that product. What are the right and left limits of the product? What is the product goal? Once you've done that, you might think about what are the resources that need to be pulled together to deliver that product, and then set guardrails for those resources. Guardrails would be what are the left and right limits within which they can self-organize themselves. Train those individuals and then allow them to self-organize into teams that can be set up to deliver the value that you've requested. And then let them sprint, right? So that's a very high level overview, but start by asking the question again, right? What are my products? Is Agile the right fit? What are my products? Identify your resources, set your guardrails, let them self-organize, and then let them sprint. And then as they're sprinting, there's feedback loops built into that so they can improve the way they work together. So I think that I've answered your question, but let me know if you have any follow-ups to that.
Awesome, thank you. Daria, Shirley, anything to add there? Or should we move on to the next question?
I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what was said here around the find the product. I think this is a very important piece that from my work with platform teams and infrastructure teams, right, kind of that core engineering, is that often what they perceive is that, well, the customer is so far away from us because we are building the platform. By the time it gets to the customer, and they're thinking about the end user. But sometimes your customer, the value you're delivering is not to the end user of your organization, right? And for me, that what helps really the platform teams I worked with is to understand that who is going to use what you're building? Well, it's the development teams maybe, right? That are building their applications on our platform. Well, this is the value you're delivering. You're delivering value to those teams, not to the end user directly. And that helps kind of switch that conversation and really focus on how can we produce the highest value for our customers, which are actually internal customers. You know, so that definitely can help. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Daria. Okay, so this next question, we'll start with Daria for this one. What is the advantage of using Scrum versus Kanban for areas providing services? So for things outside of software, and maybe talk about advantages of using elements of both.
So what are the advantages of using Scrum or Kanban? I think it's kind of coming back to what Mary was saying, that you need to identify which framework or which approach is best for you. So if you are in a complex environment, you want to look into those agile frameworks, but if you're not, maybe not. Now, in terms of Scrum versus Kanban, Scrum for me is really that framework that helps you deliver great products, because the framework itself is focused on delivering on goals, delivering value. We have sprint reviews with our stakeholders and customers, so that go back into, let's see what we delivered is actually what we want to deliver. Right, so that for me this is where a lot of value comes from. And if you are focusing on that customer, how do we make our customer happier? How do we deliver better products? I think that Scrum is a better framework to look into. In terms of Kanban, it really, for me, more about flow, right? How can we go through the work more effectively, right? How can we increase our throughput, decrease our work in progress, right? Kind of get through that, get to done. But I would say that if you have items that you need to work on that are drastically different in complexity or in the effort that needs to be put into that, using Kanban will be not as beneficial, just because you will have one big item that will take a long time to go through the workflow, and then you have smaller item that will go through quickly. So it will be much more difficult for you to actually plan using your metrics that you're collecting in this case. And I think that this would happen if you are working more on that product-centric and kind of value-centric work.
I just want to add to what Daria mentioned already, that Scrum being a framework, it provides us boundaries. There are clear accountabilities, the focus on commitments such as product goal, sprint goal, the definition of done. So it's beneficial to the Scrum team and also to the organization when you're dealing with a lot of uncertainties. And it doesn't have to be versus, it's not about Scrum versus Kanban. In fact, Kanban practices, they complement Scrum very well. So I'm going to also add that to the answer. I think it's Svitiana who asked that question.
I'll jump in and add on top of that, that there is a course offered by Scrum.org, which is Professional Scrum with Kanban. If you are interested in incorporating Kanban practices within Scrum to improve the flow of your team, to limit work in progress, Professional Scrum with Kanban can offer a lot of information about how to do that. And you can get some experience in how best to implement those practices with your Scrum team.
Awesome. Thank you all. So this next question, so can you talk about Scrum and construction, example, roads, tunnels, and bridges? I am wondering how the iterative and incremental approach would work in this field. I'm not sure if any of you have direct experience with this, but I was going to throw this one at you, Shirley, to talk a little bit about your approach in fuel and oil and energy and those types of industries, so that maybe Francesco here can kind of draw some comparisons.
Okay, so the first part of the question was around can we implement Scrum in construction? You may, but we're not also saying here that every process should have to be done in Scrum. There's a right process for the right problem. And in construction, because it's pretty much you do the design, then you have the team in construction to implement that design, then it's pretty much straightforward. So you can use a predictive process for that. However, I also have personal experience in adopting Scrum when we were constructing our vacation home. And we did it using the principles of agility. Which one should we do first? If we have a budget allocated to build our vacation home, what is the value? It's still the principle about value creation. Which one should we focus on first? And once you apply those principles, whatever you're doing, whether it's a very predictive process or something that is much more complex, you can still frequently inspect and adapt and focus on what value am I really looking at. Hopefully that helps. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's about whenever I have organizations I'm working with, I ask them, what is the goal, and how do you think Scrum can be used for you to be able to help you move closer to that goal? Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Thanks, Shirley. Do you enjoy your vacation home?
Yeah.
Okay. This next question comes from Dave. I'm going to throw it at you, Mary. Cross-functional, non-IT people in a Scrum team and IT people, so a combination of both in a Scrum team, tends to have challenges during Scrum events, especially when the content of the discussions are getting too technical. How do you make non-IT Scrum team members feel, I'm assuming that you meant to say feel less isolated and confused, Dave, here?
Okay, great question. First off, I want to say congratulations that you have a truly cross-functional Scrum team. I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Right. So this is a wonderful problem to have. You've clearly taken a step back and you've defined your product well. A lot of teams struggle with having those cross-functional teams in the first place because they have teams that are too highly siloed. So defining that product is an important step that clearly you have achieved. To the next point, when making sure that teams are having the right level of discussion, use good facilitation techniques. So professional Scrum facilitation skills can help you. That's a new course from Scrum.org. But one of the things that we use on our teams is ELMO, right? It's an acronym, which essentially stands for enough, let's move on. So if the team begins to go down a rabbit hole and they're having discussion, which is too much of the how we're going to achieve this thing, then any member of the team can say, Elmo, right? Enough, let's move on. Another thing that I would keep in mind, and I think this is really important, is remember what is the purpose of each one of the events in Scrum. So for example, the purpose of the sprint planning event is to plan the sprint. The purpose of the daily Scrum is to improve the likelihood of delivering a done increment that meets the sprint goal. So making sure we understand the purpose of each event can be helpful. A lot of times when people start to go down rabbit holes, it's in that unofficial event called refinement. And a lot of times you'll be in the refinement meeting and people start to talk too much about how we're going to deliver that thing. And it's important to rein people in and say, the purpose of refinement is not necessarily to get into the how we're going to do that thing. It's to talk about what are we going to be delivering on this particular product backlog item. The how can be discussed a little bit further in the sprint planning meeting, but we don't want to get into that rabbit hole in the refinement meeting. The purpose of refinement meeting is to talk about what we're going to deliver and ask the question, is it sized so it can be delivered within one sprint? So I like to bring it back down to three things: good facilitation, making sure that we're focused on the purpose of the events, and then use those techniques like Elmo to limit discussion to what is reasonable within the context of your discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Anything, Shirley or Daria, that you'd like to add there?
I think that's kind of to follow up on that part, especially when it comes to refinement, and then we go into those details, or say you're kind of going into too technical discussions or too specific discussions. For example, in a daily Scrum, right? You don't want those discussions to happen exactly there. But what I find useful sometimes is for people who need to talk about a specific problem or discuss one specific item to just talk to each other. You don't have to include everyone unless they are really interested in knowing all of those details, then maybe there might need to be a separate conversation between the technical people to go deep into those, how are we going to build that, which might not be necessarily needed for the rest of the team. So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And I dropped a link to a page that we have on the Scrum.org website with a bunch of different facilitation techniques that you can use in your Scrum events. So be sure to check that out. There's a bunch of different links and resources there. My screen just jumped. People keep adding questions. So this next question comes from Boz. One of my challenges in non-IT teams is the product and increment thinking, especially teams that are providing services. Do you recognize this, or do you have suggestions in how to help change this mindset? I'm going to give this one to you, Daria.
Okay. Yeah, I'm reading it just to help me. So I've even in IT teams, I'll tell you, even in IT teams, that product or increment thinking, it can be a challenge sometimes, right? So it is really a change in mindset, and rightly so, not only for IT, but non-IT teams, it's all the same. Some of the things that I like to use is when we are kind of starting our implementation, or, if I'm starting working with the team, I really like to do some workshops with them to help them understand some of those concepts. And what I like to do is bring in real life examples that are not related to work, such as Shirley was saying, we were building our vacation home, right? This is a very real life example that anyone can really relate to, just understanding what would it look like, right? And this is how I like to bring it in. And we first trying to understand that product and increment thinking when we talk about those real life examples that have nothing to do specifically with Scrum or Agile or the work that the team does. And once that clicks, which is easier, much easier, because now you're asking them, okay, well, this is the product that you are using. You are an actual customer of this product. What does value mean? What do you want this product to do for you, right? And that is much easier to understand because you can take in any kind of product you're using, and you will be able to relate to it. And then once this understanding is there, now you can start switching to what does the value mean for our product, right? It also helps to look into identify new customer personas. So that definitely is important to understand who are the users or the customers of your product, and then start thinking from their point of view. Another technique that I used also with a team when we were building a new product is another workshop where it's like, okay, this is our product, our customer, they come into our office and they want to use our product. What do they do, right? What is the first step they're going to do actually, right? Well, they're gonna sit down at a desk and I'm gonna launch the product. Okay, great, you launch the application. What do they do now? Where do they click, right? And then once you walk them through that journey of a customer, actually very, I'd say, tangible, it is much easier to see that value, because now you're looking at your product from the point of view of a customer. Yeah.
I'm going to add a little bit onto that, if I could. And sometimes with service teams, it can be hard to think about this incremental delivery. So another thing you can do also is think about establishing sprint goals every sprint. What is our goal for the sprint? What is the main thing that we're trying to accomplish in this upcoming sprint? If you're a service team, sometimes that does mean that not every single product backlog item is supporting that goal, but what's the main thing we want to accomplish? And that can help you focus on this idea of incremental delivery. Because as Daria said, Scrum can be used to deliver a service. It can be used to deliver a physical product or a vacation home, right? So it can be used in all of these contexts. No matter what context you're using it in, go back to the Scrum framework and look at what are the things that the Scrum framework includes. And one of those things is that sprint goal. And there's a reason for that. It helps establish that mindset of incremental delivery. What are we trying to accomplish? Why are we doing this?
Great, thank you, Mary. This next question comes from, and thank you, Daria, as well. So this next question from Megan. I'm gonna throw this one at you, Shirley, just based off of some of your background and experience. So I am a new Scrum Master in the finance industry, working with a team delivering a regulatory project. I am finding it challenging to win business stakeholders over using Agile and the Scrum framework, as the response is usually, we have deadlines we have to hit. Agile doesn't work for this type of project, which is under immense pressure.
Okay, that's a good one. Based on my experience working with organizations, it's the mindset that we have to help them with first. When they're very focused on, this is the deadline, this is the scope, I want it done immediately. But shifting that mindset from very much into, inside out approach, changing the inside out approach, such as scope, budget, time, and then guiding them into shift in paradigm, wherein we focus more on product, the 3 V's in product development: vision, value, validation. So that's what I usually do. And once they get it, they now start having that conversation is, what is the vision that we have, and how can we help our teams align with that vision? How do we focus on value? What should we do first that is creating value for us as an organization? And choosing the right metrics, because the way you measure will also influence the behavior within the organization. So how do we validate if we are really achieving value? So vision, value, validation, focus on them, and invite them to your sprint review to create transparency. And once you build that trust that stakeholders, this is what we have so far, what's your feedback? What do you think about the outcome of our sprint? And then you start engaging them and make them involved, so that they are not just about, have you completed this on your committed dates, etc. So make them part of what you're doing. It's about systems thinking. Everyone in the organization is part of that one big system. So even the stakeholders, their feedback is important so that you can build the right product and hopefully achieve an impact, whether to your end customers or within your organization.
I'm going to jump in again, sorry. But I just want to say I 100% agree with everything that Shirley just said. And I also want to add that you can absolutely use Scrum for hard deadlines. In fact, it's going to increase the likelihood of meeting that deadline if you follow the advice that Shirley just gave and focus on what is your vision, right? Have the right metrics to measure how, how are we achieving, how are we making the right decisions? Are we heading in the right direction? You can absolutely use Scrum to deliver that thing that you're working on that has a hard deadline. And in fact, you're going to be a lot more likely to meet it if you use Scrum, depending on making sure that you're in the right context. Is this a complex problem? Making sure you still do the things we talked about a little bit earlier, which making sure that you're using the right tool for the right problem. But Scrum can absolutely be used when you've got a hard deadline.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I just want to thank the audience for these questions that are coming in. There are so many of them, and there's a really broad range of like different areas. So thank you all for sending these in. If we do not get to all of them today, which we probably will not, I will work with our panelists here to get these questions answered in some sort of format. So I just wanted to make that known, since we are running up on our time relatively quickly, but we still have time for several more questions. So this next question I'm going to direct toward you, Mary. Hi, I'm mainly interested in starting Scrum in sales and marketing. I'd like to hear about your experience and things that you were struggling with. So if you want to talk a little bit, some examples from the teams that you've worked with, because I know you've worked with sales and marketing folks.
Absolutely. So yes, I've worked with sales and marketing folks. The thing that sales and marketing teams that I've worked with tended to struggle with is there's a lot of requests for a sales and marketing team. So making sure that you have someone who's going to be accountable for ordering that product backlog or the to-do list for the team is really critically important. And then giving that individual the autonomy to make those tough decisions, right? Everybody wants to have that attention from the sales and marketing team. For example, if your sales and marketing team is for an organization, right, you're going to have different individuals internally coming to that team and asking for work. So you need to make sure that you're supporting that product owner and making those difficult decisions. Ultimately, it's up to the product owner on how to order their product backlog. One of the techniques that we've used to help them make those prioritization decisions is RICE. It's an optional complementary practice that helps individuals that are responsible for ordering the product backlog to make those important decisions. So it talks about what is the reach, what is the impact of this thing, and it helps them order their product backlog. So that's the thing that we've struggled with the most, is how to make those difficult decisions and giving that product owner the autonomy and also the tools that they need to make those important decisions.
Awesome, thank you, Mary. There are so many great questions here. This next question I'm going to throw at you, Daria. What would you recommend if the team is responsible for more than one product and it's almost impossible to set one sprint goal?
Well, that's a hard one. How many people do you have on the team? Can you have 2 teams?
Yeah.
That would be the easiest approach. If you can actually have dedicated teams, maybe smaller teams, that would be the best. Now, we don't have a rule in Scrum that says that your team has to work on one product, right? It's not a rule. It is definitely a recommendation, because this is how you will be able to achieve most value and be most effective. I would say that what you want to do is you want to minimize the context switch that will be happening during the sprint. What often happens is that people kind of work on 2 things at the same time. So they work on this product and then they switch midday and they start working on this. This is a lot of context switching. This is a lot of time lost. And this creates a lot of frustration for people because they are unable to actually complete things they know they can do, right? They know they can finish it, but they are unable because they're losing a lot of time. So the way we would do that is we would actually dedicate parts of our sprint to specific products or specific features. Say the first week we're working only on the first product. The second week we're working only on the second product, right? You want to minimize that. Then another question I would ask, can you dedicate one sprint, say this sprint to product number 1 and the next sprint to product number 2? Because that way you are actually separating, you can focus on one thing, you can have really good sprint goal for this particular product and have the team focus on it, right? So there are some kind of a couple of different ways of how you can approach it, but what you definitely want to do is not only minimize the context switch, but also plan for it. It's going to happen. So plan for 20 to 40% of the time that will be lost in context switching. Do not plan your sprints at 100% utilization. That's not going to work anyway, right? It's just going to pressure your team to deliver potentially at a lower quality. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Daria. This next question comes in directed at Shirley. So it says, question for Shirley in regards to the goals and outcomes to ask for the company, what they would like to achieve through Scrum. If the company has no knowledge about Scrum or any framework, how would they know if Scrum will help?
Well, there's a very lightweight reference that they can download, which is the Scrum Guide.
Yep.
Only a few pages, so we can put the link, Lindsay, in the chat. And know that Scrum is only a framework. It's a tool, so that it's actually a tool being used to better communicate and interact as a team. It's about how people, how they can communicate and align with each other in terms of achieving the outcomes that they want. It's very simple, no? Very simple. There are only a few required elements in the Scrum framework, and it's centered around goals, accountabilities, the artifacts that can help in creating transparency, the events that can help in giving feedback. These are the inspect and adapt opportunities. So if they are not familiar with Scrum, they can read the Scrum Guide, and there are a lot of references as well on the Scrum.org website, case studies that can help them on how they can get started with Scrum. And and if they need if they have questions, there are a lot of webinars as well that we provide on the website, and they can reach out to any of us trainers here if you have any specific question, and perhaps we can help you.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see here. Here is a marketing focused question. I'm going to give this to you, Mary. It's for pharma specifically, but it says, in, for example, marketing and pharma, you don't see progress daily. What cadence would be reasonable to have daily scrums? Do you still have them every day, or what have you seen?
You should absolutely still continue to do the daily scrum daily. The purpose of the daily scrum is to increase the likelihood of delivering a done increment that meets the sprint goal. If you're not having that scrum daily, then you're reducing the collaboration opportunities. You're delaying the time that it might take in order to identify potential impediments. So I would definitely recommend continue to have that daily. And I also saw another question pop through. I'm going to answer that too. What does RICE stand for? It stands for Reach, Impact, Confidence, and Era. And it's a complementary practice that you can use to help the product owner to make decisions on the ordering of their product backlog.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Anything either of you would like to add, Daria or Shirley? No?
Just that I agree 100%. Keep doing
Awesome.
it.
Perfect. So shifting gears to a little bit of a different general topic, I'll give this one to you, Daria. Do you have a suggestion on how teams with a lot of external dependencies could work with Scrum?
First things first, to make it transparent and very, very visible what those dependencies are. What I often find with organizations, especially bigger ones, is that they have lots of different connections and dependencies and kind of information go in different ways, but no one actually knows what the bigger picture is. So one of the things that I do when I start working with organizations is I meet with as many people as I can to identify what does this structure actually looks like, right? Where are those dependencies? How do they work? And then being able to present this information to everyone. And often people look at this visualization, they're like, wait a minute, why is that here, right? And that really helps everyone understand the complexity of it, but also be mindful of it much more because you have it visualized. So it makes it easier, first of all, to communicate around that. Another thing would be to try to understand why those dependencies exist. Sometimes, well, it's just the way we used to do things. So if this is the answer, what can you do to change it? What can you do to make it more effective? Maybe there are some gates around, say, we need to have an approval from this department on this item. Okay, why is this approval important? Well, maybe your team doesn't have the knowledge to actually approve it on their side. Well, can we bring that knowledge into our team to reduce that dependency? So you want to kind of look at all of the structure and try to identify which dependencies are kind of the low-hanging fruit that you can minimize or eliminate, possibly.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of how you can start minimizing those dependencies. Start visualizing, make it transparent, and then identify which ones you are able to minimize or eliminate. And then for the rest, plan for it, right? Always remember that you have those dependencies, plan for them in advance. Sometimes teams come into the sprint planning and they have an item in their product backlog, and they know they cannot finish it in the sprint because they're dependent on another team and they still take it. So think of that. Look at each item and say, are we depending on someone else? Do we need something from someone else to actually be able to finish that? And if the answer is yes, and you know you will not be able to get it this sprint, why would you take it, right? What can you complete, right? Where are you more confident in being able to deliver value to get to done?
Awesome. That's really great advice. All right. We have time for, I think, one more question. I'm going to give this one to you, Shirley. So this question comes in from Christina. We work with Scrum for mechanical product development. Often such a development is fluid. It doesn't have classic sprint length segments. Any tips on how to define a sprint goal in such cases?
So it's mechanical. Can you repeat that, Lindsay? It's a
mechanical product development.
And their challenge is being able to create a sprint goal.
Yes, without having like standard sprint length segments. So it sounds like it's pretty fluid and they don't have like a defined sprint length that they use regularly. That's what it sounds like to me. If that's incorrect, type in the chat, Christina.
I would say that having a regular cadence that is consistent, for example, 2 weeks cadence, that can lessen the complexities that you have. And if you have it's the heartbeat, it's the rhythm. So if you keep on changing the cadence of your sprint, it adds more complexity. You don't even know whether the team is making progress. So I would say, as a Scrum team, you decide how long will be your sprint duration or cadence, and then use that as your learning opportunity. Use that as your rhythm and heartbeat. And if that is too short for you, maybe there's an opportunity for you to break down your product backlog items into smaller units that you think can be achievable within that boundary of a sprint.
Awesome.
Send me a follow-up question if I was not able to answer directly your question, Christina. I think that was Christina.
Great. Thank you, Shirley. Any final thoughts any of you would like to leave with the group here? I think we're kind of at our time to take more questions, but I'll allow these last few minutes for you all to share, how people could connect with you as well. But any final thoughts any of you want to share?
Yeah, I think I would like to share a little bit. I just want to say, try it and see how it works for you. Try the Scrum framework as it's designed. The consistent sprints, as Shirley was mentioning, the sprint goals, as we were talking about earlier with Daria. Take a look at the Scrum framework. When you have questions about how you should deliver something, go back to the Scrum framework, because everything's there for a reason. And all of those things together can help you manage that complex product that you're trying to deliver. And then if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My website is rebelscrum.site.
Okay.
Shirley and Daria, I don't want to.
Yeah, I think to kind of add on to what you said, Mary, is that remember that not everything that seems or that is used as kind of a necessity or a practice in Scrum, not every practice that teams use across the world are actually required by Scrum. So there are some practices that might not be working for you, but it's not Scrum, right? You don't have to use some of those. So you need to, same as Mary was saying, go back to Scrum, see what is actually needed, because the framework has everything you need. It has that foundation. So if you follow it, you will be able to see some results. Just don't mix up the necessary elements of the Scrum framework versus different practices with that. But yeah, kind of to piggyback on that and say that in the same way, you can reach out to me, and I think we'll have our links to our profiles on Scrum.org in the event page. So if you have any questions, I think it can feel free to reach out to us to get some answers.
Awesome, thank you. And Shirley, anything you'd like to add?
And remember that Scrum is a tool. It is a framework, but what's more important is it's also about behavior. In an organization who's trying to be more of an agile organization, especially in the digital age right now, it's about creating alignment using Scrum as a tool for you to create that alignment, working towards your goal as an organization and as teams. And if you need to also reach out, you can check our profile on Scrum.org website, and we'll be happy to help and support you and your organizations.
Awesome. Well, thank you to the three of you so much. This has been such a great discussion, and thank you to our audience for the overwhelming amount of questions that have come in. I am going to be sharing these questions with Shirley, Daria, and Mary post this session, so we could figure out a way to address these. Maybe we'll even do a follow-up podcast. We will figure out a way to get these answers to you. And thank you all so much for taking your time. Please stay connected with us through our forums and social media channels, as well as our blog and the other free resources on our website. And I hope you have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are located. And thank you all again, and Scrum on. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.